Good afternoon, everybody. Caroline at Self Care Rocks, and welcome to our little tutorial we're going to do this afternoon. I get asked a lot about how to get started. And lots of people get inspired by seeing some of the work either I do or other people do, and want to give it a go, and they head out and they get themselves a kit and get back and start dotting and get quite disappointed by the results that they get, and they stop, which makes me really sad, because connecting with our creativity is such an important part of our well-being, but also what we tend to forget in our rush to want to be good at something is that the process of creating something is as important as the end result we get. And of course, we're only going to get better at something by practicing or by learning. And so one of the things I want to do today is some real kind of top tips for beginners for when we're starting out, so that to give you that confidence to keep going, to keep practicing, and knowing that you will be able to create something that's going to look really nice pretty quickly, actually. I always keep my very first mandala that I created as a reminder to myself of how quickly we can improve through practice and through learning. So I'm just going to lean forward and get mine here. I declare my very first mandala, which you will see is a rather splodgy affair. One of the things that we'll look at today is paint consistency and how we use our tools, because there are some classic mistakes in that that are very easily rectified and get us having really beautiful mandalas very quickly. So, welcome to my little kind of art studio that I have here. I can just about show you what I've got in front of me. This is where I sit and work and do my painting. I do also have another little workshop outside in the garden, which is where I do all the messy stuff, and I'm also in the summer as well. It's getting a bit nippy to be out there now. So the first thing that we need to look at when we are doing mandala painting, dot painting, is looking at what we're going to paint onto. I love to paint on to stones. Obviously this is Self-Care Rocks. Part of the rock is in what I like to paint on. So I love painting on these rocks. You can see I haven't painted the bottom, so you can see what it really looks like. There's something really nice about painting onto something that is so natural as this, but there are some pitfalls that come with painting on rocks, and actually the word pit is one of the clues. When we look at this side of the rock, we can see there's quite a lot of little bumps, but when we pick up a stone like this, it feels pretty smooth, and we're like, yeah, okay, great, I can paint on that. But it's only when we start dotting that we realise the impact of all those little tiny indents on the stone. The smoother something is, the more likely you are to get those really nice, crisp, sharp dots, which we all look for. So there are some ways around that, but also we don't have to paint on stones. I'll show you some of the ways around that in a minute. We can paint on all sorts of different things. So I've been really enjoying at the moment painting on these, can you see that? There we go, these beautiful marble coasters. I just bought these pack of 4 or something from the Range, I believe it was. Hi Jacqueline, we'll talk about paints in just a minute. So these, I'm basically always on the lookout for anything flat. So these are really nice to paint on. I've also been painting on these lovely wooden heart shapes. This one I've started to paint the colour one on front already. Wood is really nice and smooth and nice to be able to paint on. And also these little ceramic tiles here. These were just from Hobbycraft. Again, really nice and smooth to be able to paint on. But all sorts of different things at the moment. Was my lead long enough? I've just started working on this lovely lizard here. This is just a plaster of Paris, I believe. Found him in a shop in Shropshire and painted him, and just starting to put some patterns onto him. But you can get moulds as well. So have a look on Etsy. You can get all sorts of moulds where you can actually create your own rocks from plaster of Paris, so it's already smooth. But if you're not painting onto something smooth, it's really easy to get that lovely smooth look. Let me just grab this. I use this modelling paste. So it's just like a thick textured paste. I put my paint into that, mix it up, and then paint it straight onto the rock. And then I will use wet and dry sandpaper. So I might start at kind of 400 grit and then work up 400, 600, 800 and 1200 to get that really nice smooth look. But you don't have to use anything specialist like this. You can just rock over to any DIY store or Wilkinson's and get a decorating grade polyfiller and just smooth that onto your stone. And then again, just use the sandpaper to take down any little lumps and bumps and get a really nice smooth finish. So that's making sure that we've got something nice and smooth to paint onto. And then of course the next thing we need is paints. So I use acrylic paints and all sorts of different paints out there depending where you are and the shops that you've got around you. But this is one of the brands that I use here. I get this from, they have this in the range. If you're local, also Coleman's, one of the stationery shops, will have this. You can get it online as well. Amazon has this. Also Hobbycraft, if you're in the UK, has their own range. Again, very similar. Hi Kansas. We've got people from all over the world joining us today. Hi Wendy. Acrylic paint is what you're after. They're not expensive, a couple of quid for one of these pots. Just go out and see what's in your local craft shops. You'll find all sorts of different things. Now the key with your paints is to make sure you've got the right consistency. So all different brands of paints are going to come slightly differently. I've got another one here. The tubes of paint like this, the tubes of acrylic like this tend to be a lot thicker as opposed to the ones in the, I don't even know what you call these, but these ones tend to have a much looser consistency. But often in the same brands, different colours will have a slightly different consistency as well. So getting the right consistency before you actually start painting on something is quite important. The consistency you're looking for is kind of like natural yoghurt. Okay. Hi Toki in South Africa. Wow, we really are going international today. The consistency of the paint you're after is like natural yoghurt. So as you put your tool into it, or as you stir it with a little stick, as you bring it up, it will come up, but it won't form a peak. It will drop straight back down again. So it's not so liquid that it won't kind of form a little bit, but there's enough consistency in there, but it drops straight back down again. It won't form a peak like if you're not trying to make meringues, okay? You want that nice kind of natural yoghurt consistency. Now, if your paint is too thick, it's really easy just to start to get it to that better consistency. You can just use water. So I have always on my desk a little pot of clean water with a dropper in it, because literally all you want is one drop at a time. So if it's too thick, one drop at a time, stir it round, see how your consistency is, and then if it's still too thick, add another drop. Literally, you'll be surprised how far one drop goes. You can also get special media that is designed to liquefy your paint a little bit more. This is one that I use, or Liquitex is another brand. Again, in your craft shops, you'll find these different pots to be able to change the consistency. This one's got an extra gloss to it as well for a bit of additional shine. So consistency of your paint is really important, because if the paint is too thick, that's when you get that really splodgy look that I was talking about here on my first mandala. So play around with your consistency. I will always, when I'm mixing a paint, have a bit of card next to me. So when I think it's the right consistency, I will just test it and see how it comes out on the actual card. If it's too thick, it's going to form a bump, a really thick kind of bump. If it's too liquid, then you're going to struggle getting round the corners on your stone because it will drip. Now, again, there are some paints that are too liquid. Again, you can change that by using one of the medias, or you can get away with using a hairdryer to dry the dots really quickly before they start to run. So that's the paints that's important for us to have a look at. And then our tools. How do we actually create these beautiful dots? Got something, I'm halfway through here. How do we create these beautiful dots here and make them look so lovely and crisp and clean? Again, the tools we use are really, really important here, because I started out, I think that one I just showed you there, I think I might have been borrowing my husband's drill bits. I was using not the end that you actually use to drill the hole in the wall, but the other end. Anything that has got that round circular end has the potential to be a tool that can create dots like this. Now, there are some tools that are designed specifically for this artwork, and I love using everything I use is messy. You'll notice this already. These tools here are great. One end is one size, the other end is another size, and they are numbered as well, so it makes it really nice and easy. When you get down to the really fine dots, these tools are great. These are actually designed for doing nail art, and again, you've got different sizes on the different ends. Another thing that's really great to use are these plastic crochet hooks, but you want to use the other end. Again, you've got that nice round end. These plastic ones are great because they're really easy to clean, and also as well, these tend to come in a packet with lots of different colours. So although they've not got numbers on them, actually this one has, this is a 12mm one, I've got the size on the bottom, but it's really easy just to grab a different colour. You know the colours either go up or down. So yeah, Windy, the paint consistency I think makes such a difference. If it's too thick or too thin, I quite often will mix up my paints, the colours I tend to use a lot. I will mix them up in these little pots here, but if I've not used them for a couple of weeks, I'll always check the consistency, because heat, cold, it'll if it's very hot or the heating's been on, it will change that consistency. If it's too thick, then it's really difficult to get a nice clean dot. So tools you can get just these days. When I first started, you just had to kind of find stuff, but now if you just type in mandala dotting tools to Amazon or eBay, you'll tend to find some kits. The one thing that I would avoid are these tools here. I just think some people find that they work really well for them, but I think there's a huge inconsistency in what people find. I think these aren't designed for mandala dotting, they're actually designed for sugarcraft, but what I tend to find is they're much more difficult to control. It's much more difficult to get your dot central, and there are tools now that are designed specifically. People used to use these because you couldn't get anything else. Now there are really cheap tools out there, really easy to use. A lot of the kits still have these in. I wouldn't waste your money on them. I still find them difficult to use, and actually I don't even use them at all now. So these ones I'd avoid, but the plastic either crochet hooks or the ones that are designed specifically for mandalas are probably the best ones. These ones I think come from Canada. Can't remember. Oh, it says DIY mandala stones. That's where they come from Canada, but they arrive really quickly in the UK as well. So that's the tools. A couple of other things that I always have by my side when I am dotting is I will always have a couple of little cocktail sticks or toothpicks. They're really good for just mixing the paint and making sure that you've got your right consistency, and also some cotton buds. These ones I quite like because you've got a pointy end and a flat end. These ones are also good because they've got paper sticks, so much better for the environment. But these are good for the odd little mistake here and there, the odd dot going astray in the wrong place in our pattern. So those are my tools that I use. So let's get dotting. Let's start to have a look at what we can do. Now, when I start a project, I will always just experiment a bit on paper. So we can see here, I thought Christmas is coming, let's experiment with some Christmas colours. So I put my two main colours in these squares at the top and then played around with the other colours that I had just to try and come up with a colour palette for what I wanted to do. And then had a go at just creating a very quick pattern beneath it. Now this pattern is just really a bit of a template, because once you've got the idea of a pattern that you're going to use, what you're going to paint on will change quite dramatically what you're going to do. So for example, here's one that I painted onto a coaster. So that pattern looks quite different if we use the same pattern and we put it onto a little rock, because as it starts to form around the shape, it changes, and how much space we have to do things changes. So if you look at a spiral on a flat, it looks like that. But if you start to put a spiral onto a stone, it looks very different, and you've got more space to do things with. So what you're going to paint on, don't get too hung up on your creating a template like this. It's more of an idea so that you can use that as a base and a foundation. Once you've got that, then you can start to do all sorts of different things with it. So what we're going to start on today is we're going to start on, I'm going to use this green stone, I think. We are going to have a go at putting a mandala onto there and start to see the difference between when we do it on a rock and when we do it on something flat, and just start to see how it comes together. So just bear with me a second, because I'm going to now change you into my little phone holder here so that you can look down on the work I'm going to do. So don't get travel sick while I do this. Hold on a second. Now then, I am just going to check you can see. Just bear with me. I'm going to pull up on my other screen on my laptop so that I can still see what is going on and read your messages as well. Just bear with me a second. While we just get this set up. So it looks like we've got people from all over the place today, which is fantastic. Here we go. So I can start to see what you guys are seeing, and I want to be able to see your comments as well. So what I'm going to do whilst I'm painting is I'm going to focus on the painting, and we're going to talk about things, and then what I'll do is just quickly check and see your comments. So I think you can all see now the rock that we are chosen here. Now, one of the things that I do when I check out my pattern, you'll notice that down the side here are some numbers, and these numbers just remind me of which tools I've used. So that 12 refers to the size 12, which is the red dot in the middle. 3 refers to the next row, 5 the next row, and 8 these big ones here. So it's just a reminder for me of roughly what size tools we're using. But again, that might change depending on what we are working on. So let's pick our tools. The key to any successful mandala is the central dot. That's the dot that forms the basis of everything that's going to follow. So it's really important that we get that one right. Now, I always like to do a fairly large dot in the middle because that gives us space to be able to create the pattern around it. So this is the size here that I'm going to be using on these tools. It's a size 12. And I'm going to use my lovely, actually I'm not going to use that one at all, I'm going to use this one here. This paint, it's Christmas, we need a bit of sparkle, and I really love using the metallic or pearl paints because they really bring everything up. So this one here, these consistencies of these paints is actually great. I don't need to change this, so I'm just going to pop a little bit into the lid. Can you see what I mean when I said about that natural yogurt consistency? If I give that a little stir, there's a little peak that comes up, but it doesn't stay. It drops down very quickly. And that's the consistency that we're looking for. There's just a little bit of something, but not enough. It's going to very nicely settle down as a dot. So let's create our first dot. Now, I always just kind of find my centre before I put any paint on. Now, you can, if you want to, measure and find that. I'm pretty good at using my eye now, so I'm reckoning we're going to go around here. So, you see, I've just loaded the end of the tool with some of that paint, and again, you can see that consistency. We've not got a thick peak. There's a little bit of a peak there. And we've got enough paint on the end. There we go, softens quite quickly, that little peak. So let's place our first dot. And actually placing is what we're doing. We are not hitting the rock with our tool, okay? We are allowing the paint to meet the rock and dropping that paint onto the rock rather than stabbing it, okay? So I'm literally just going to hover my tool above it, and as the paint meets the surface of the rock, I'm going to allow the tool to drop down onto it. And we can see that's created a really nice, lovely, neat dot. Ah, the other thing that I forgot to tell you I always have is a slightly damp cloth, so we can just wipe your tool clean. Lovely. So we've got our central dot there. That's the one that's really important. If once you've placed that you're not happy with it, that's the time, don't go any further until you're happy with that first dot. You can always wipe that off. If it leaves a little stain, you can just pop a little bit of extra of your base colour paint over the top as well. But once you're happy with that dot, the next row is also really important, because that really starts to form how the pattern is going to be, and it forms the structure of that pattern as well. So if the dots on the next line are out of alignment, your whole mandala pattern will be out of alignment. So again, it's well worth taking the time to place these dots. And that's the other thing about a mandala to remember. This isn't a rush, okay? This is not a race. As soon as we start to rush it, it's going to go wrong. I always like to make sure, actually one thing I always tell to people is make sure you're breathing. There's something that happens when we pick up a tool with paint on the end and we're hovering, is that we hold our breath. And as soon as we hold our breath, then we start to get a bit tense, and then your mandala doesn't flow. And actually what we want is that lovely flowing feeling from you, because that will flow through into your tool and flow through into your mandala. So the next thing we're going to do then is we're going to sort out this next row, which really forms the structure for everything else that's to come. And again, I'm going to choose a nice metallic paint. This time we're going to go for a paler green that's going to stand out beautifully against this nice dark green background. So give it a little bit of a shake. Again, I know that the consistency of this paint is perfect, so I don't need to mix this one up. Again, you can see that peak just disappearing nicely, that lovely natural yogurt consistency. And I'm going to choose this much smaller tool here to create this first round. Now, I saw somebody earlier was talking about the fact that when they're creating this first circle, often they get to a point and they realise they've not got enough space for the next dot. Their circle has become uneven, and there's a really nice way to try and eliminate that problem. Rather than starting dotting and moving all the way around to meet your first dot, I always work in a cross shape. So I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to put my first dot at the top here, leaving some space between the red dot and my green dot. But I'm not going to place the next dot right next to it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to place it directly opposite. So we're kind of going, if that's north, then we're going to go and place one that's south. And then again, east and I'm just going to spin it round to make it easier so I don't smudge the red dot. There we go. So I've created a cross. Now you may have noticed as I went to place that, I was just making sure they lined up with each other. Always be careful when you do that you don't accidentally smudge your dot in the middle. But by creating a framework like this, it's much easier now to go back in, and we just want to place 2 more dots in here. So, one there, and one there. And then the same, we're going to fill the gap here with 2 more dots. So we don't run out of that space. We know that we just need to fill 2 dots to make these 2 meet. So to make these 2 meet, we're just going to place 2 dots between. And that means that we end up with a really nice even row of dots, like that. And that's really important because that forms the structure of the mandala moving out. So again, I haven't been stabbing the rock with the tool, I've just been loading it with just enough paint on the end and then gently allowing the tool to meet the rock so that the paint just drops onto the rock. So we're just going to wipe that tool clean, and now we're going to do one more row, and I'm going to go up another size to this one here. Always when you're looking at what size to choose, what you want is the size that's going to fit. So you can see, if you imagine just 2 of these dots here, and that I want to create a triangle by placing 1 dot here. So I'm hoping you can see that. So each of these 2 dots, I'm going to place the next dot in the middle to form a triangle. I'm going to go all the way around and do that. So when you're choosing your size of your next tool, you want it to fit snugly. If it's going to be too big, it's going to interfere with the dot next door. So it needs to be small enough to fit there, but you want it to be the next size bigger. So for example, my green dots, I used a size 3 tool for that, and now I'm using a size 5. Now I'm going to use my lovely gold paint. Now this paint wasn't quite the right consistency, so I've put it in a pot and just mixed it with some of the gloss medium to give it that bit of extra shine, and also just a little bit of water just to make sure we've got the right consistency. So I'm going to create that little triangle that we talked about with each of these dots. So between each of these green dots here on the next row, I'm going to place a dot that just sits in between. So when we're doing a row like this, there's 2 things we're looking for. First of all, we're placing that dot in between, but also we need to be aware of the fact that we're creating another circle. So we want to make sure that we are keeping that roughly the same distance from those green dots in the layer before. And again, just checking in and making sure you're breathing, because this is all about doing something for you. Do you know, this is why this is self-care rocks, okay? The whole point of doing something like this is because it's brilliant for your well-being. Because when we're doing something like this, we go into this lovely meditative, calm state because we're focused on the task that we're doing, rather than thinking about the other million things that we need to do. So allow yourself to really immerse in what you're doing, focus on what you're doing, enjoy what you're doing. Remember, it's not a rush. Actually, this is all about slowing ourselves down. This is the whole point I learnt to mandala paint, was to slow myself down, because I realised this is something I couldn't do in a hurry. Because if I tried to do it in a hurry, it'd go horribly wrong. So we can see now we've got our next layer. And now what we're going to do is start to create the petals. And just show in here, we've got, these are called the petals. And so we're now going to start to form that next ring. So we're going to go back to that lovely metallic green. And we're going to pick a nice large tool. Not that large. Let me find the size that I want. I'm going to pick a really nice large tool now, because we want to have quite a big dot there to be able to create our petal. And what we're going to do now is exactly the same as we did with the green, with the gold, but we're only going to do every other one. So if we're looking, the beauty of working on a stone is there's no top and bottom. It's the same all the way around, so it doesn't matter where you start, but we're going to do the same thing. So again, I'm just going to load some paint onto my tool, and I'm going to go and I'm going to create that triangle. There we go. So that triangle between those two golds, I've placed my green dot. I'm going to miss the next two, so I'm going to leave those two, and then I'm going to create the next triangle here. And then miss those two, and then create the next triangle here. Miss two. Next one, miss two, next one, miss two, next one. There we go. So we can see that pattern starting to form. I'm just going to double check your comments and see if you've got any questions so far. Hold on a second. Okay, if you do have any questions, pop them in the comments. Like I say, I won't be able to see them immediately because I'm focused on the painting, but I will keep checking back so that we can answer comments as we go along. So brilliant. So these are the dots that are going to form the centre of our petals. So now it's time to start to create our lovely petals. Now, creating these petals here, we start to use a technique which is called walking the dots. So this is where we load the tool, but we use it more than once. So you'll notice so far, every single one of these dots, I've reloaded the tool with fresh paint before I've painted again. But to create this effect where the dots start to fade away and get smaller, what we do is we use that tool 3 or 4 times before we go back and load the paint. So what we're going to do first of all though, is we're going to create the starting point. So I'm going to use my tool here, which is number 3, which is the same as that green dot there. And we're using this lovely bright, vibrant pearl red, which is lovely. Now we want to make sure that our petals are all nice and evenly pointed out like this. So what I always do is just make sure that if we take that triangle, we've got these 2 gold ones and this one here. I want to imagine a line running. Remember we did our north, south, east, west. I want to try and keep that going. So I just kind of imagine that line to make sure that I'm placing my dot so that the petal is going to be pointing in the right direction. So I'm just going to do 1 dot on each of these in that central point where I want the petal to point outwards. So we can see how each of these dots has got a corresponding one on the opposite side. And again, we want to make that as even as we can. There we go. So each of those dots now have got the starting point of their petal. Just going to clean that down. And now I'm going to go down a size. I'm going to go down from that 3 to a 2. And this is where we start to walk the dots. Now I would always recommend practicing this on paper first. So I'm going to show you a bit of card here so we can just see what I mean by walking the dots. So I'm just going to load my tool and I'm going to place that once, twice, 3, 4, 5. Now this is a very small tool, so you're not going to see that very clearly. So let me just do it with a bigger one for you. So let's do that again. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, with a bigger tool like this, you use a lot more paint, and so you're not going to get that effect so well. But you see what happens. Each time I go down, we get a smaller dot. But we're going to do that much more effectively by choosing the right size of tool, okay? So look at me, I always get messy. I don't think it's possible to do this and stay clean. So let me just bring back our lovely rock here. And I've got my small tool and I'm going to load that up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to follow the line of this green circle, okay? So from my red dot, I'm going to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And can you see, I only dipped my tool once, and each time I used it, the dot got smaller. So now we're going to dip the tool again, and we're going to do the same, going around the other side, following the line of the green circle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Lovely. It's always a good idea just to clean your tool in between, because otherwise you get a build-up of paint, and what you start to find is as you go around, that build-up of paint means you get thicker and thicker dots. So let's do that again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is where having a steady hand really comes in. And that steady hand, there's 2 things that really help. First of all, I actually rest my hand on here. So I'm not trying to do it like this with my fingers here and the tool over there, because it's going to end up all over the place. So I hold the tool near the bottom like we would a pencil, but also I'm resting my hand here so that my hand is steady, and if I need to, I'm moving the rock so that my hand remains steady. And sometimes I'll actually even use the rock to lean on as well. This one's quite a small rock, so it doesn't necessarily need it. But you can see actually my finger is actually resting against the rock there, just to give it some steadiness. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So again, we're just following the line of the green dot beneath. The other thing that helps us to have a steady hand, again, comes back to how we're breathing. The more steady we are breathing, then actually the more steady we are going to be. So again, just check in, make sure you're not holding your breath, and do some nice steady breathing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One more to do. Again, placing those dots rather than stabbing them, and following the line of the circle that you're running around. So that's the first layer that starts to create our petal. And then what we do to really start to form the petals is we do the same, we keep repeating, but what we do is we go up a size each time. So I started this row of petals here by using a number 3 here, and then working down with a 2. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go up a level. So I'm going to start with a number 4, and I'm going to switch my colour. Again, you can choose whatever colours you like. I just really liked this idea of doing the festive one. And again, you can see I'm just, even though that dot's already there, I'm still just running that straight line across just to make sure that I'm still keeping the points of my petal in the right place, nicely lined up. Just make sure you do that high enough that you're not going to end up smudging the work that you've already done. So you can see that gold dot's a slightly larger dot than the red one. And then I'm going to use the next size down to create the dots either side. So rather than going straight in with that 2, I'm now going back and using my 3. So I'm going to do a 3 either side of that 4. Okay, so we start to form the point of that petal. I think what I love so much about doing these mandalas is you really can go to town with your colours. So even though this is a nice traditional Christmassy colour, I'm going to look at doing this in a really nice kind of ice blue snowflake type colour as well. So we'll have a look and see how that one comes out. I know lots of people have quite different Christmas themes these days. I tend to stick with the traditional red just because our lounge is red. It allows us to add that extra Christmas sparkle to it. There we go. So again, we've got this point of our petal that's slightly bigger than the row below because we've just gone up 1 extra size. So we started with a 4 and then a 3, and now I'm going to go back to that 2 and walk the dots the rest of the way down. So same as we did with that red row, I'm just loading my tool and I'm just going to follow the previous row that I did. Always following that. So don't try and follow a different line or create a different pattern if you want these lovely petals. Follow the original line and it looks so much better when you do. Beautiful, you can start to see these petals starting to form now, can't you? You see how quickly something turns from a blank stone into something that's already starting to feel quite festive, isn't it? One more petal to do. Here we go. Fantastic. And I start to see how those petals are starting to come together. And already you can see the paint already starting to dry. And we're going to do one more row on that set of petals. And actually what I'd really quite like to do is I'm going to go up 2 sizes this time because I really want to create a real dramatic outside to this petal. So rather than going up 1 size, I'm going to go up 2. So we've used a 3 and a 4 and I'm going to jump up to a 6 and I'm going to go back to this lovely metallic red. So again, I'm just going to follow that line and create the point. And we can start to see the shape of the stone starting to have an impact on what this pattern is going to be like, because I'm starting to get to the bit where the stone is starting to wrap around the pattern. So now I'm going to go down a size. So we're going to go to the 5 and just create that point. Always loading the tool. Definitely if you're using a tool this size, you really need to load it in between each dot, and also because we want each of these dots to be the same size. If I didn't load it each time, we'd get a slightly smaller dot, as we see when we're using the walking the dot technique. So just give that a clean, and then we're going to go down another size. So now we're down to a 4. You can see how this is a much thicker outline because this is the last one on this row of petals. We might have space to do a second row. The other thing that can help with, especially when you're doing patterns, but also with that kind of meditative breathing, is actually counting the dots that you're doing. So this is 4. This is petal 5. So quite often as I'm breathing, I will use the counting to help me with my breathing, especially if you're getting quite complex patterns. Quite often you'll get to this point here. If you're doing like an 8 petals mandala, you might then forget where you've got to here and do another dot of the same size rather than knowing that it's time to change your tool. So I quite like doing that breathing and counting together. It helps. Going down another level now, so we're going down to the 3. Now I'm also starting to get to the point here where I need to be careful that I'm not smudging the work that I've already done. So often there'll become a point with your mandala where you're going to need to leave it to dry before you can do anything else. Which is why I quite often have 2 or 3 things on the go at the same time, so that I can move to something else whilst this is drying. There we go, so that's each of those petals done. So now we can go down to our number 2 and walk the dots. So you can see we created that kind of walking the dot technique here by actually going down each tool size. But then when we get to a number 2 or a number 1, we can't go down any more sizes, so then we need to use the walking the dot technique. We've also got very limited space in between here, so we might find that 1 or 2 of these where we need to do a single row in between. We'll just see as we go along. I'll explain as we hit any of those problems. So we'll start here, and again we're just going to do the same thing, walking the dot, following that previous line. 1, 2, 3. Just see how many you can fit in. Load the tool again. I think we'll just about squeeze this in. 1, 2, 3. You see it's getting a bit tight there, but just about fit it in. Yeah, this is where it starts to get difficult. I don't want to smudge anything I've already done. So 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I think as well I find that the counting helps me to spread the dots out evenly. I know how many I'm trying to fit in. See here, we're not going to fit another row, so I'm just going to do that one so it kind of joins together. The thing about doing this, I think I mentioned on one of the posts before, is that the beauty of something that is hand created and hand painted like this is those little imperfections that you'd never get from something that was created by a computer or a machine. It makes it individual. There we go. So We're not aiming for perfection, because actually perfection looks a bit weird. They do that thing, don't they, when they show you someone's face, one half of someone's face, and then they have replicated it to be exact on the other side, and it actually looks really strange, because we're not programmed for that perfection. We actually like to see things that are a little bit different. So here we are. This is where we've got to. We've done our first row of petals. And I think this stone needs to dry now, because if I try and do anything else on this now, I'm very likely to smudge the work that I've already done. So I think this little beauty needs to sit and dry before I do anything else. Also, I need to consider actually how much more I can fit around here. We need to create our designs to match the size of the stone. I think we can fit another row of petals around here quite nicely, because it will hug the stone a little bit like this one here. You see how the second row of petals here allows the pattern to hug the stone, which I think is really, really nice. So I'm just going to check in and see if any of you have got any questions. Let me have a look. Oh, I've got Massachusetts as well, Santa Maria as well. I've got loads of people. Do I use real rocks or wooden ones, and where do I get them from? Okay, yes. So my rocks, I use real rocks. Here's one that I collected earlier. I've got a whole bag of rocks. People collect rocks for me as well, because they know that I do this. So when people go to the beach, because ironically, for those of you who aren't in the UK, where I live is Northamptonshire in the UK, and it's about as landlocked as you can possibly get. We're as central in the country as possible. So any beaches are very far away. So lots of people will collect stones for me and bring them back. I'll also collect river stones as well. I'm very careful to not take too many from one spot, because it's nature. I don't want to disrupt nature too much. Also, they get really heavy to carry. I'm always looking for the shape. That's what I'm looking for. This is a beautiful shape. It's really nice. It's round and it's flat, so I can fit quite a big mandala on there. But I do also like these this shape here, where you can wrap the pattern around it. You can get moulds to create stones like this, pebble shapes. So if you look on somewhere like Etsy, there are some of the mandala dotting companies will have moulds that you can use, so you can fill with, I guess they use plaster of Paris, something like that, to create these lovely, beautiful, smooth stones, so that you can create them without having to go and collect them from nature if you don't have that available to you. You can use wooden ones. I think, again, with wood, it's going to depend on the type of wood that you use. So let me just grab something for you. Hold on. This lovely little... I'm going to move my stone so I don't smudge it. This lovely little wooden box here, you can see, I don't know if you can see, it's made from, I don't know, I guess this is like a balsa wood. So it's really quite rough. So that would be really hard to get nice clean dots on. So what I did on the outside was the same as I would on a rock. I used that modelling paste and put my paint into it, painted that on, and then smoothed this with sandpaper. So this is now really smooth and ready for me to dot mandala. But you can get some really nice other things. Hold on. So this one here, that's just a wooden, it's not slate. Slate is really hard to dot onto because it's so uneven. So this is just a really thin wooden board, as is this one here. This is just a little, it did have a little quote on it. I've painted over that. And you know, I said that I was going to do this as in a nice winter theme. So you can see here I've picked some really nice, it's going to be a bit kind of snowflakey, icy. So I shall create something on there. So that's wood as well. But yeah, I just am on the lookout all the time for anything smooth. So when I'm out in the shops, so there are shops like The Range and Wilkinson's here in the UK. I don't know what you have in America. I think I hear a lot of people talking about some of those shops that are similar, home range shops where you go in and you can get things for pretty cheap. Anything that's smooth, that's all I'm looking for. Anything that's smooth, that's got a nice shape that I can then paint and turn into to something. So this is a little plaque here. It's the exact same design that we've done here, as you can see. only I've started the next row of petals. But before I start that next row of petals, what I want to do is really to start to bring this to life by adding a second row of dots on the ones we've already got here. So this is called top dotting. This is where we put more dots on top of the ones that are already there, so you get that real kind of 3D effect. So when we're looking at doing this, I always choose my size, just checking it out first. So I've just picked up a tool here, just happened to be the one that's next to me, so it's a size 7, and I'm just going to see what that feels like if I put it on this red one here. And actually that feels okay, it doesn't feel too big. I don't want it to completely cover that. I want to create a dot within the dot. So I'm just going to use my gold here. I'm going to load that, and again I'm just meeting the tool below. There we go. So we get that gold drop added on the top, and this is what really starts to bring the mandala to life. I know a lot of people get a bit nervous about top dotting because they don't want to ruin what they've already created. So always make sure that your bottom layer is dry, because that does mean if it goes in the wrong place, you can use one of your cotton buds with a bit of water on to wipe that away and clean it and start again. So we're going to stick with the gold, I think, and I'm going to want to put a small dot inside this green here. So I'm going to stick with my really small one. So I'm just going to put a small one, and again, got to keep your hand nice and steady for this. So I'm not hovering my hand above the board, I'm actually resting my hand on the board to give me that steady feeling so that I can place the dot where I want it to, rather than it going astray. You see how this really starts to bring the whole pattern to life. It gives it that kind of real 3D effect. It makes it pop. There we go. And then we're going to go out the next layer. I think we'll take some green, and I'm just going to see, what size I think is going to fit well in this gold. So I could test out my 3, and if I test out my 4, actually my 4 feels like it's going to be too big, because you need to allow that paint to relax a little bit onto the layer below as well. So I'm going to go with a 3, and exactly the same, I'm just going to place that dot in the centre of the one that's already there, resting my hand on the board, or if this was a stone I'd be resting it on my block beneath. This block, by the way, is just a piece of polystyrene that I've covered in this is that kind of tabletop-y plastic stuff, which you can wipe clean, same as what I've got on the desk beneath me, and it just lifts everything up a little bit so it's a bit nearer to me, so I don't get such a quick neck, and also so you guys can see what I'm doing better. It's not so far away. So there we go. So we've got that one done, and then we're going to do a gold one in the central petal here. So I'm probably going to go up a size for this, always testing out first just to see what feels right. That 5 feels nice, that 6 feels too big, so we're going to use a 5. And again, just loading up, dropping it into the centre, what's already there. Dropping it in. There we go. And then I think we'll do a red on this gold one here. Oops, don't get any paint on that. Oh wow, that red on that gold really pops out, doesn't it? And these gold ones here that I'm just top dotting now are going to form the next row of petals. There we go. So you can see where we are here. We've created this first row of petals, and we've just done these gold ones here that are then going to form the basis of this next row of petals, which is exactly the same as we did here. I've chosen to do different colour combination, but you could choose exactly the same colour combination. But it's exactly the technique, same set, same technique, same sizes. I just mimic exactly what I've done there. And you can keep going as wide as your board or your rock is. So you can either fill the space completely, or you can leave some blank space. So like I did on this one here, I actually offset this one off centre and left some blank space around over here. So you don't have to do everything central. You can offset things to give it that little kind of quirky edge. And you can see how this is very similar. Lots of petals, lots of rows of petals, each one's slightly different. And then I went a little bit crazy with these lines here to give it that kind of feel, a bit like fireworks even. So one pattern you can do an awful lot of different things with. So did a very similar one here where you can see we started with a spiral in the middle, and then off the spiral created the petals to be able to create that effect and technique. So I hope, I'm just going to check in and see if we've got any more questions. I'm not going to make you sit here and watch me do other rows, but what I will do is post back later when these have dried and I finished them. Actually finishing, that's the important thing as well. So with these, once you've created something so beautiful like this, you don't want it to fade and get damaged. So I always finish these with two different things. The first thing I finish it with, hold on a second, I've not got it to hand. Let me just grab it for you. Oh, here we go. So this is, it seals your paint in. So this, you dilute this. So you dilute it 2 parts of this to 1 part of water. So I have a little pot of this that I have that's already mixed up here. And then when I finished and everything's dry, so I did it at least 24 hours, then I put a coat of this on. So you just paint it on and allow that to dry, and that seals, it puts a layer of sealant between anything else that's going to happen. And then I will spray on a varnish, a spray-on varnish rather than a paint-on one, because I just find you get a much better finish. Have I got any here? I haven't got any here. All my sprays are out in my outside workshop where I make a bit more mess. But again, same things. It tends to be the same brands as these things. You can get them in your craft shops. They are just a spray-on, either matte or gloss. I'm a bit of a fan of the matte one, to be honest with you. It just has such a lovely finish. So this has been finished with a matte spray, whereas this has been finished with a gloss one. So it's just personal preference, really, and depends on the design. Sometimes you want it to be more glossy. And again, always let that cure. So I would let the sealed, this layer that you're putting on to seal, that also means if you're going to use it as a coaster, it becomes heat resistant as well. And it means that any varnish you put on, even if that varnish fades or goes yellow, you can take the varnish off, and that layer of sealant will make sure that your design is still protected. So once you've painted this on, I'd always leave that to cure for 24 hours before you then spray with your varnish spray. And again, you want to leave that for at least 24 hours to cure. You might want to do 2 different coats, but leave it for 24 hours to cure before you start doing anything with it, because it'll still be a little bit tacky. And then once you've done that, then your design is nice and safe and sealed and will always remain beautiful and bright and vibrant. And if it's going to be a coaster, won't get damaged by the heat of the mug. So that is how we finish things off. Let me just check if we've got any more questions. Just bear with me. I think that's it. I'm just going to bring you upright so I can see you again. Hello. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you found that useful. I'm just going to quickly check back in here as well and see if we've got any more messages that I missed. Lovely to have people from so all over the world. Hello, thank you for joining me. I hope that's given you some really nice tips. Remember, the consistency of the paint's really important. The smoothness of what you're painting on is also really important. And the tools that you use. I'm going to be doing some mandala alongs soon. So where we'll choose a pattern and we're just going to mandala along together. I'm going to do it on Zoom so that I can see you guys as well, because right now you can see me and I can't see you. And if we're going to do a mandala along, I want to be able to see what you're doing so I can give you tips and tricks as you're going along. So for these mandala alongs, if you're here in the UK, then I can send you kits. So I can send you a starter kit that's got everything in you need, including your tools, or I can just send you a project kit that just has the paints in as well. Or if you've got all your own stuff, you can just join me with that. If you're anywhere else in the world, it might be quite difficult for me to get a kit to you, but who knows? I'll have a look into that. It might be possible. But I can certainly send you a list of what you need, so when you go out to the shops, you know what you're looking for. And so if you're interested in joining me for a mandala along, then make sure you like this page, make sure you like Self Care Rocks page, because I'm going to be adding them on there as events so that you can join them. I hope that's been helpful. I hope that's helped some of you to be able to really take your dot mandalas to the next level. I hope it's got you a bit unstuck if you've been feeling a bit frustrated with your results. And if you have any questions, then just post on my Facebook page, message me, ask those questions, because I want you guys to be enjoying this as much as I do, and I want you to be able to connect with that creativity that you've got. I'm not an artist. I can't draw anything. If you ask me to draw anything that looks like something, unless it's a cat, it's not going to happen. But patterns, mandalas, using those dotting tools, look what you can do really, really quickly. So I hope that's inspired you. Enjoy the rest of your Sundays and let me know if you have any questions. But thank you so much for joining me today. I've been really enjoying it, and thank you for all your comments and your questions. I will catch up with you soon. Bye.